Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. Ready to get going for the 2023 season. I think we still have a few more months to go, but we kind of have solidified everything for the 2022 season, just a little bit up for grabs. I'm your host today, Ronnie Moore, as usual, and my co-host, as always, Kyle Jessie, the digital content editor at Bassmaster.com. A lot more responsibility on Kyle's plates these days. And Kyle, it's good to be back on the podcast. We took about a 2-week break after knocking one out with Tristan McCormick, and there's a couple different reasons for that. We had the Thanksgiving holiday, but also I was pretty dang sick with the flu, and so we just decided to take a break. But now we're back and excited because we have a full field Elite Series roster we're going to get to talk about in this episode. But how have you been, man? How was Thanksgiving?
Oh, can't complain. It was good. Went back to Arkansas. It rained, as you know, pretty much the entire time. So that was no fun. But I guess unlucky and lucky for you, you picked a good time to be sick because it was continuously bad weather. So you didn't want to go outside anyways. But man, it was good. How about yours?
Man, it was fine. I got to watch the Razorbacks lose, to Missouri inexplicably and lost a bet with somebody. I got to buy my buddy Josh lunch now because he picked the money line of Missouri +3, and I was like, boy, you're gonna lose that one. He said, you want to make a bet? And then who would have thought that Arkansas would lose that game? But no, yeah, I was on a week-long road trip, got to go and shoot some content with some anglers, and I did a high school tournament MC in it. And I guess, somewhere there, somebody was sick that I shook hands with or gave a hug or whatever. And, drove 12 hours through the night to get home. And then that Sunday afternoon, I started to feel bad. And, who knew you could get the flu anymore? But I did, and it kicked my butt like it normally does. That's how I knew I had the flu. That thing normally kicks my butt worse than anything else. So I got the flu and tried to stay away from the girls for as long as I could. But, Thanksgiving morning, I was like, you know what? I'm feeling a lot better. Let me just go and actually see my family and leave the spare bedroom. And boy, did I not just get Sarah sick. And then she got Marlo sick. We had to deal with the fevers and all that stuff with babies. And we're back to normal, though. Marlo felt a lot better yesterday. And so has Sarah. I've been good for this week. So I've been back in the office. But I'm kind of
Well, I
hitting
will
another
say
gear before Christmas now.
I think I would feel more comfortable if you wore your mask during this podcast, even though we're 500 miles away or however far we
I'm
are.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. We're gonna get canceled on here for mocking that, but no. Yeah, it's the toughest thing dealing with that these days because you don't feel the best, but you also don't want to get anybody else sick. And so I
Right.
stayed away for a little bit. That's why the content on YouTube and Bassmaster.com for video wise has been a little slower. I took some time. Now I'm back and we're starting to pop out stuff at the end of 2022 because next year, Kyle, we're going to have a new Elite Series field, and everything seems to change over the last few years. So I wanted to get and use an episode specifically about what changes there were for the field. Obviously, we announced the field a couple weeks ago once the opens were finished up, and now the nation is finished up. So we have our last angler who accepted an Elite Series bid. So the past few seasons, we've changed different field sizes. So in 2020 or 2019, we had 75 anglers. We didn't cut anybody. Everybody got to come back, and we added another rookie class. So we had 13 more. We go to 88. Then we add another 12 or 13. We go up to 100. And then there was a vote that was had. What do you want to be at? 80, 90, or 100? More people voted 90 than any other number. So we go to 90. And it's always 90 or whatever the field size is plus exemptions, and those exemptions are legends exemptions and medical exemptions. So it's always a base of 90 or a base of 100 or a base of 80 plus those things. And so the little bit of changes for this year is in the middle of the season, we had 90 to 94 anglers all year long. We had some guys step away, come back. We had some guys inexplicably in the last couple of events had to take a hardship. And so, our field size changed throughout the year, but there was about the anglers got together and voted and said, we were basically like, what's our field size going to be? And what do you want it to be? Because we're going to try to lock this in for some kind of consistency going forward. And so the vote was to go back to 100, make it clean 100, especially with the opens format changing, where we're going to have the top 9 from the opens. We'll still have the winner of the nation. So we'll have 10 new people every year, plus 100 anglers. So it's kind of a cleaner number, even though it's going to be a little over 100, and it could be, some people retire some years and it'll be a little different, but having around 100 and having around 10 come and go, that's a good percentage. Losing, we were getting to the point where we were we were at 80 or 90 people and we were losing 14 or 15 a year and swapping them out. And that is just a high percentage. I don't know. Let me just see real quick what that would be. Let's just say it's 14 new people out of a 90-person field. That's over 15% of the field switching out each year. After 2 or 3 seasons, depending on how it goes, you could end up having 50% of the field be new, depending on who gets kicked out, if any of the rookies, if all of them stay and stuff. So we wanted to put some kind of consistency there. And now hopefully this 100-person field size or so will last for the next couple of years, just like our opens format will last for the next couple of years. So that's the deal with that. And with that, Kyle, with the vote to go up to 100 from around 90 to 94, and then a couple things happened. We had some anglers retire. We had some medical exemptions come in. It ends up that we ended up not having to cut anybody. That's what I've been getting peppered with the last month and a half. Are you guys going to put out a list of who's getting cut? And I'm like, why is everyone so infatuated with the 5% that are getting cut? Why don't you focus on the 95% that are returning? But people want to know and people care. So wanted to outline that no one is getting cut from the Elite Series this year. The way it worked out, our field size went up because of the vote. We had Jay Yellis, Chad Morgan Taylor, Dice K. Aoki, and Jessie Tacarante all retire, I do believe. I don't think I missed anybody in that retiring deal. We had Brad Watley in the middle of the season take a medical hardship. He ended up coming back after getting treatment, so he's all good, but he was kind of taken out of the Elite Series roster, even though his average would have requalified him, and he's just an addition to the field. But when I say addition to the field, him and Clark Winlet, who are medical exemption guys, they would have qualified either way. They both had good enough averages to come back if we did make a cut. So I do not want to make it sound like they are additions, and that's the only way they're back on the Elites. They would have been on the Elites with their average either way. So with 4 people retiring, 2 people medical hardship, you had Rick Clunn requalify with his average. So we had 1 extra legend spot open up. We invite Larry Nixon, and David Fritz is now on his last year of his medical his legends exemption. We invite Larry Nixon. Those are our 2 legends. We've got our 2 medical hardships with Winlet and Watley. So that's the 4 additional anglers. And then with the 12 opens anglers and 1 nation angler, that's how we get from 92, 93 to 100. So that's our Elite Series field, as everyone who fished last year, except for those couple who retired. And then we obviously have added a couple guys for legends, but overall it should be still a stout field.
Yeah, kind of it seems like the last, I don't know how many podcasts we've been sitting here waiting to see what the final Elite Series field would look like. Obviously with the nation championship yet to have happened,
Yep.
Some of the last podcasts we've done. And then, the Larry Nixon news is obviously great and things of that nature, but it's kind of like college football in the sense we're just sitting here watching the transfer portal and just waiting to see. But now it is definitely good to see the full field, and I'm glad that we have something to talk about as far as things of that nature. But no, it's definitely a positive that we finally know the full field.
Yeah, and I think we have 55 or so anglers in the Classic next year, and we'll add 1 more to that with the team championship coming up at Lake Hartwell. I believe next week, the 2nd week of December, they will knock out the team championship, and we'll crown 1 last person there for that. Yeah, our Elite Series field, and a couple other changes that'll be had, and I don't even know if I'm privileged enough to say this on the podcast, but once I guess we say it and we do it, I'll just have to ask for forgiveness later. But the way we'll also have the format, Kyle, one thing that's been, before the split happened, 2018 and to 2006, they had like a requalification process where it was your average for your career, but if you fish more than 5 years, you get a drop year. And those things all basically stayed the same, except when we had the split, we had to change it and make it averages over the lifetime of the split, because some guys had 0 Bassmaster history and guys had 12 years. So we had to find a happy medium on how to make it fair for requalification. We didn't want guys who were here forever to be able to rest on their laurels. We didn't want new guys who had a burst of good finishes to just be safe forever as well. We wanted to create it fair. And so that's been different. It's been the full field's dealt with a whole average deal. Am I safe on average? Obviously, if you're in the top 10 in AOY, unless you've had a bottom 10 the last couple of years, you're going to be, you're safe. You've done it performance wise, but we're going to go back to what used to be the qualification. Now that we have most of our field has 3 to 5 years of Elite Series history, a lot of those averages are going to level out. It's not going to be such a volatile roller coaster. They're going to have a couple years to lean on. A lot of these guys will start to have a drop year as well. So they'll get rid of their worst season and it'll level out a little bit more. Who you are average wise is who you are. But we're going back to 2018 and beyond, and before that, where there's a certain place in the Angler of the Year standings that's going to be safe. When you are at this position and above, you're safe for that next year. You could have finished last your first 2 years on the elites, and you're about to get cut, and you get above that mark, and you save yourself. So there's still going to be a performance-based deal, but instead of looking at 100 anglers and trying to figure out everyone's average, their average is only going to matter for about 30 anglers, and that's going to be the 15 who make it back with averages and the 15 who are the 10 or so that'll get cut with having the worst averages of the bunch. And so 70 is going to be that mark. We have 104 anglers. If you're in the 70th or better in AOY points next year, you're going to be safe. So if you have any questions, is my favorite angler going to make it back? If they're above 70th, they're safe. You don't have to ask that question. If they're below that, then we'll factor all the averages between those guys. Obviously, if they're a rookie, they get 2 years, things like that. But the Legends exemption guys do not get 2 years. They get whatever year. Like if they only have one legend point and they get invited, they have to make the top 70 to requalify that year. Otherwise, they use their point up. So I think Larry Nixon has 3 legends points that he's coming in on. I think David Fritz has 1 more to use this season. And so for Larry Nixon, being an AOY, 2-time AOY and a classic champ, he'll have a couple points in store for a couple years. And one thing I wanted to get into that, we're going to have a guest on the podcast today that knows about half of our Elite Series newcomers this year, whether they're rookies, former Elite Series that are coming back, or like we said, Larry Nixon on the Legends exemption. He knows about at least half of them pretty well to be able to speak to their skill set, what we should expect from them. But man, Larry Nixon, you're an Arkansan, born and bred Arkansan. I'm a transplant here. But obviously, anyone who's in the country knows Larry Nixon and his fishing history can admire, and he's an idol and a legend to a lot of anglers. Do you have anything specifically related to Larry Nixon that you're just growing up in the same state as him? I mean, he did a lot of his work right before you were born, but he's been catching them for years. Even though he's in his 70s now, he still catches them, and so I'm excited to see him, someone who's got some legend status but can hold their own now as well.
Sure. No, so I mean, I think the main thing is that just the name Larry Nixon, carries so much weight in the state of Arkansas and really, across the country. But it's a name that gets talked about a lot. He's still super well versed with the Arkansas fishing scene, which is something I've always found just crazy because you think he would just kind of move on and not really worry about it so much. But pretty much everybody I'm super close with that's big time tournament anglers there in Arkansas. All have a personal relationship with him. I can remember being in college. There was an FLW event at Beaver Lake, one of the 10,000 that were at Beaver Lake, and I got a picture with him, and I've got a Razorbacks hoodie on, and he and I sat there and chatted for a long time. And that was the first time I'd ever actually got to meet him. Obviously, was one of my heroes growing up, and yeah, so naturally when I heard that news, I was pumped. So I'm looking forward to getting to know him better this year, and get more, hopefully one-on-one time, getting to chat with him and hear him tell some stories and things of that nature.
Now, the one thing with Legends exemption that people always are wondering about is how do we pick, or there's obviously a list of guys who have AOYs and classic wins. How do you pick them? And the first criteria is if they're currently fishing a Bassmaster tournament trail. So if you're not on the Elite Series, so let's just say Hank Cherry is on the chopping block for getting cut out or getting kicked out. If he goes to get kicked out, he would be the top level. He has a classic wins, 2 of them. He has, same with Jason Christie. And because they're current Elite Series pros, they would get first dibs at a Legends exemption spot, which is why over the last few years, Fritz and Clun have gotten those Legends exemption spots because they have current Elite Series history that they're fishing. The next level would be the opens, obviously, and then maybe the nation or something like that. I don't think any of these legends can go back to college and fish, but the opens and then the nation would be the levels that they could do. And so Larry Nixon fished the last open of the 2022 season at Sam Rayburn. Obviously, looking at the list and seeing that really no other legends or people up for grabs for that were fishing them. If you jump in one or two of them and you get to fish, you have fished a level of, and anybody could do that. You could have a former Elite Series pro fishing somewhere else that could jump in an open and be eligible for that and be at the front of the line if they wanted to. But so Larry Nixon's back, and I saw him at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame banquet. And I never spoke with Larry Nixon until COVID hit. So COVID actually allowed us to be able to talk, and we did a mystery science theater thing, but we called it a cast from the past. And we got to watch his 1983 classic win at the Ohio River. Me and Tommy Sanders got to watch it back with him on Zoom, and he got to commentate what was going through his mind and what was happening. And we got to watch that old footage with a new, fresh commentary on it. And so it was cool to see Larry Nixon in that environment. We got to talk. We texted. He's came to studio a few times. We've interviewed him about Ray Scott recently for a couple different features things, especially for the 50th Classic. We got to talk to him as well during that time. And so really got to, I guess, grow a relationship with him. And I saw him just a month or two ago at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame banquet. And I said, Larry, we're going to see you next year. And he did that. If you know Larry Nixon, he did that, glasses on, got the scruffy beard, and he turns and looks and says, you may just see me a little bit more next year. And I was like, let's go. And so he obviously fished the Open a few weeks later. And so he'll be added to the field. I'll go through real quick before we bring our guest in, the other rookies in the field next year and new guys. David Gaston qualified from the Opens, all these guys from the Opens, and then I'll mention the nation winner. But David Gaston, Keith Poche, Will Davis Jr., he is our nation champion. He's qualified as well. Coming into the Elite Series next year, we have Larry Nixon, like we mentioned, Joey Cifuentes, who lives about 15 feet from Larry Nixon, I do believe. We have Bryant Smith from California, Cooper Gallant from Canada, Alex Wetherell from Connecticut, Kiyoya Fujita from Japan, Logan Latuso from Louisiana, Bradley Hallman from Oklahoma. He'll be back on the Elite Series. John Sokup from Oklahoma as well. We have Cole Sands from Tennessee, former college champion. And then Kyle Norsetter from Wisconsin. I believe that's everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yes. So those are the new guys. Let's bring in our guest today. And Kyle, our guest is none other than Luke Dunkin. Luke Dunkin's somebody who's been in the professional fishing scene for a little while now, and he's been in the industry for a long while. And he knows about half, if not 3/4 of the new guys that'll be on the Elites next year. So we're going to get his candid thoughts on that and just the field size, the schedule probably, and just some stories. So let's go ahead and bring in old Luke Dunkin to the podcast and see. It's kind of weird having a podcast host come in and join a podcast. Normally, podcast hosts just do their own thing, but we're going to bring in Luke Dunkin today from his the Low Budget Live Bar and Grill and see if he can get it done today as our special guest.
Now, I gotta ask, was this part of an exchange for like a home and home series for you being on Luke's podcast and vice versa? Is this part of a deal that I wasn't aware of?
Yeah, exactly. But the only thing about it is that our audio is going to work this time for our podcast. So we're going to be able to hear Luke. Unlike with me, I got gypped. We had some really good stories. Good thing I'm a loudspeaker, but Luke, can you hear us today, Luke?
I can hear you now. I was, Ronnie, I'm very unprofessional when it comes to the show that I do weekly.
Not at all.
And I was having a hard time making this work. Yeah, you did get screwed on the audio portion of the Low Budget Live, but it was a well-received podcast.
Yes, I'm excited to do another one at some point in the future as well if we get the chance.
With a microphone that works.
I'm going to bring my own, but I'm re-inviting myself, and maybe Kyle can come up as well. But Luke, we got to and I feel for you. Technology is just a beast of a thing to tackle, and so if I unplugged my laptop right now, I'd last about 4.5 minutes on my actual battery. So I got to keep me plugged up, which defeats the purpose of a mobile laptop. But so I get that, and you've had some issues, but you've got them all lined out now. And man, how has it been? You've been interviewing some of the some of the guys who are making the switch over to the opens, and then you've obviously interviewed some guys who have qualified for the elites next year, like Bradley Hallman. What's the vibe that you've gotten from some of these guys? Obviously, it's their job, man. We often see online on social media and stuff just kind of complaints, whether it's at the gas pump, like life of a touring pro, filling up, or I got to make my deposits. And it always seems like it's a burden to be an Elite Series pro at times, or any professional angler. But I know there's a level of excitement, even for guys like Bradley Hallman, who have done the pro route and have now just gone on a different path to try to come back. What's the overall vibe that you felt from some of the guys you've talked to that are coming back to the opens, or that have already made the elites for next year?
Well, I think the overall vibe is, the opens aren't to be taken lightly, right? I don't care if you're Jason Christie or Bradley Hallman or, insert whatever name here. They make it look easy at times, but it is not an easy task to get to that top level of professional bass fishing, and rightfully so. And next year is going to be even harder. But I think there's always a sigh of relief, like from Joey Fuentes, Bradley, Bryant Smith, some of these guys. There is this just overwhelming sigh of relief that, man, I don't have to fish the opens next year. But it's like you qualify and now, welcome to Murderer's Row. Also, it doesn't get easier, but those opens, man, with the 9, and most of these guys fished all of them. I know Bradley made it through the Centrals, but he was in all 9. Brian Smith only fished the Southerns, but he's fished more than that. And he was also fishing the MPFL as well. So a full plate, right? And I think there's always that sense of relief that comes with the excitement of, man, at least I get a shot. If I do my job, I can stay at this level and not have to go through the gauntlet that is the Bassmaster Opens, man, because they're fantastic tournaments. I talk about it all the time, but you see these guys, I have to throw my little buddy Sam George under the bus. You see these guys, they're fantastic fishermen, man, but they'll be one spot out, two spots out.
John Garrett.
$1,000,000%. John's another guy comes to mind for sure. Josh Douglas.
Yes,
before
for a long
qualified,
time.
And so it's way harder than anybody ever realizes, because 225 boats, man, and a lot of fantastic anglers in the mix always.
It's kind of one of those things too. I mean, you think of, rewind 5 to 10 years ago, it seemed like you saw a lot of the same faces in the opens every single year. But now, I mean, you say this a lot. The competition's obviously going to get, stronger and stronger, but it's true. I mean, you're seeing a whole set of guys every year now going to continuously jump back in the opens, to where you have all these hammers like the ones you mentioned, the ones that have been super, super close. And then you throw on another 5 to 10 guys that are going to make that even more difficult. I mean, it's kind of a hard question to answer, but like, where do you see this going in the future? Because I feel like we all kind of see it the same way. If I think makes sense.
Well, I think between what you guys have built there, between, the high school ranks, the college fishing ranks, we know the competition, especially for those younger guys, they come out, you look at a Tristan McCormick, these guys come out firing. They are seasoned before their season, right? So, I mean, we've seen it with some of the elite guys, whether it's LaHue and Atkins. I mean, they came up through those ranks as well. Brandon Cobb, they're ready. But then you mix in these veteran guys that are coming over now from the pro circuit. We got some MPFL guys jumping into the opens that have fished with us for 2 years over there. So it's just going to get harder. But I wonder, Kyle, I think about this a lot. This is not something I've talked about on the show. Will a guy like a Sam George have an advantage, even though there are fantastic fishermen coming in, because he knows what he's getting into? He knows, hey, I've got to have this kind of average to give myself a shot in the 9, because I've been here, I've been in the trenches. So I wonder, or a guy like a Kyle Austin, right? Like those guys have been in it. It's going to be interesting to see that top 9 next year, man. I think that I'm hearing numbers. I won't throw that out there.
No, you can't.
Podcast.
I already
okay, you already
busted out on the Bass University podcast yesterday. They asked me, and I was like, "You said it, and I'll just confirm it, but I didn't say it, so it's all good. It's all good." But yeah, like that's the thing is, how big of a change is it knowing, like, catching a bass is catching a bass, and catching them in 9 different random, let's just say there was 100 tournaments open for grabs and you just fish 9 of them. It's a different kind of thought process than fishing a structured 9 events, knowing the format. 3 days, you got to make it to the top 10 to make the final day. There's no mid cut, 100 make the cut to go on to the day 3 or whatever, like an Elite Series event where half the field makes it. If you don't know your format, you can catch bass with the best of them, but learning how to practice for a 3-day event, if you're stepping up to a 3-day event, learning how to manage fish, learning how to handle boat numbers, being 175th on day 1 of an event and it not going well. Well, your season could be ruined if you let it not go well for too long on day 1. You have to figure it out. And so I know you've jumped into the professional ranks, and then you've also done the opens as well. Is there a big adjustment for year 1 for some rookies and some guys that jump into the opens as a rookie, or even now qualifying from a 3-day circuit with maybe unlimited practice prior? I know we've changed that now, but now going to a limited practice and 100 anglers. And you got to catch him quick, and you got to catch him big.
Listen, I can tell you, going from the FLW tour, and I never set the world on fire by any means, but I was competitive, and going from that world, and we had marshals, in 19, the last year I fished, we didn't have co-anglers. Not saying anything bad about co-anglers, but that's another thing you do have to deal with in the opens, right?
Yeah.
It's a factor. I had a guy at Cherokee this year on day 1, fantastic angler, West Coast guy, and he blasted the smallmouth out of the back of my boat. I'm fighting the wind. He's up there with 6-pound line, like, got another one. And man, it starts to really, it messes with you. And I had forgotten that, like, oh, okay, that's how this goes. So I think the guys coming from that pro circuit, 150, 160 boats, when you throw that 225 in there with co-anglers, dude, it changes everything. Bradley Hallman and I talked about it. We saw a guy like Scott Martin. He barely got in. Fantastic angler, certainly knows how to practice, knows how to break down bodies of water. The guy he's done it his entire life. And it doesn't matter who you are in the opens if you're boat 175. You know what I mean? Because there'll be 12 guys find a productive stretch, and it doesn't matter. And the fish definitely don't care who you are. We see that time and time again. So I think just automatically assuming, if you're a guy, that you're going to come from, hey, I was top 10 AOI over here at the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit, whatever. You're not just going to walk in to the Elite Series. It's going to be, oh man, I think this year the opens, and you guys did it right with the EQs, it's going to be one of the most entertaining things to watch in the sport next year.
And Kyle, I'll say this. I mean, literally, I love Bobby Lane, and he is a heck of an angler. But boy, did it get a whole lot tougher when you see the number that 175 people signed up to fish all 9 when you had 80 the year before. And yes, we only took the top 3, and it worked itself down to about 6 or 7 in the standings with double qualifiers. But boy, I mean, you got to catch them. And 9 events, you got to be consistent. You're allowed more of a slip up with 9 than you are with 3, but there's a lot less luck that can come into play. It's hard to get lucky 8 or 9 tournaments rather than getting lucky 2 out of the 3 and surviving one of them. But somebody like Bobby Lane, it's going to be a lot harder, Kyle, when you have 175 people fishing for all 9. And it's not like they're in the race for all 9 and then they bow out. Like, they committed to be in the race for all 9. Like, they didn't just, we'll see how it goes till 4 or 5. No, they signed up for all 9 for that reason.
It's inevitable. I mean, you can't predict who it's going to be, but there's naturally going to be somebody at the end of this next season that you thought for sure would make it, and you'd be like, well, now what? I mean, that's just kind of the reality of what this is going to cause. Not in a bad way. It breeds competition, and makes people better, or guys better anglers. But you look at the first year that Upshaw, Castledine, Hallman, all those guys fished. It was just a foregone conclusion by a lot of people, even myself included there to begin with, that it was like, these guys are going to make it no problem. I mean, I think Hallman would tell you firsthand, and did tell Luke, it is incredibly difficult, and it's putting, some strain on these guys that, like I said, you might have thought would have no problem, but it's just a different animal altogether. I mean, like you said, it's not like fishing the Elite Series. You hear that from a lot of guys, and I've heard that from a ton of anglers, that the difference between fishing the two, and mostly guys that fish both, it's completely different. Luke, I mean, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, because somebody that's fished the opens and then obviously fished at the professional level, like there's different approaches to, going about it, right?
Well, no doubt about it. And for me, and this was changed this year, one of the biggest things for me was that unlimited practice time, coming in. And I think guys would tell you that was frustrating for me, because I'm used to that off limits 3 days. I like 3 days of practice, 2.5, whatever. Let's get it going, and if you got to learn on the fly, if you don't find anything in that short amount of time, that's fine. But I was showing up at these lakes like Pickwick's, my home lake last year, prime example. And I practice about 3 days, right? I got a lot going on. It's the home pond. I got secrets. And you roll up on day one, and you're like, oh, these 75 other people have been here for a month. They know all the secrets now. So that
They're
for me,
locals by that time. They're locals as well.
that's
They
right.
fished
And
three
look,
tournaments out of Yellow Creek the last 3 weeks.
exactly. Yeah, you're looking at and you're like, why is that guy in the BFL or what, or the federal? What's he doing? That was the biggest thing for me in that adjustment. Now, that being said, this year, that's gonna shake things up, I believe, for some of the guys that maybe are perennial opens guys, because they do practice that way. Because that what I learned, if you were committed to the opens, you better have that mindset, because you were going to get beat by the guys that had that mindset for the most part. The guys putting in 10 days of work and willing to sleep in the back of their truck, and you know what I mean, make that dream happen. And for me in the opens, it wasn't like that. I'm like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to practice 3 days. No, you couldn't do it. You could not do it. So that was the biggest thing making that switch for me. But now next year, that's obviously totally out the window, because you got a month off limits,
Yeah,
and then
it
a
kind of
5
goes back.
official practice.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the Elite Series deal, except with the opens, we gave them the weekend for official practice. We gave it a month off, no practice, no info, things like that. And then you've got the official practice time, which is Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of tournaments. It'll obviously alter if a tournament starts on a different day than a Thursday, but 4 or 5 days of practice, that's a whole lot better knowing if you show up on a Sunday because you had some other confliction or obligation. That's the one other thing. These guys who are touring pros already that are trying to make that change, they have a lot of other responsibilities that maybe young guys don't have coming out of the college series to go into the opens. They don't have other family obligations. They don't have any other sponsor obligations. They got to be at this expo over here, that expo over there. They got to go speak at this dealership then. So they can show up whenever. It was always very tough to see guys who were showing up on a Sunday or a Monday feeling like they were behind because somebody had been there since Wednesday before. But I'll say this, David Williams told me this. He's like, man, I don't like practicing more than 3 days for an open. And he's a guy who's won the Southern Opens points race twice. One very, very tough thing to do. Now, it doesn't always translate to the elites. Now, we also see guys who have 10 days of practice in the opens. They make the Elite Series, and then they have no problem only doing 3 days of practice for an Elite Series event, and they just catch them. There's different things. There are guys who will not catch them because they need that extra time. But David Williams always used to say, I hate developing 4 or 5 patterns, because then I've got this pattern that I'm catching them on. The next day I got a different pattern I develop. Which one's dying and which one's coming on strong? And I'm trying to run too many things. I'm stretching myself too thin. I need to have 1 or 2 things going so that I know when they change, I'm not like, well, I haven't ran this pattern in 6 hours. Has it changed? Is it gone now? And so I think that's we're going to get. And I say we're going to get a well-rounded angler, and you fought the good fight, Luke, on social media with me, and I'm glad that we prevailed in that. And I'm just kidding. But the thing is that we're trying to create a well-rounded angler, and that's not saying that the last few years of just a single division or 3 events is not a well-rounded angler. There are guys who are going to be legends forever that qualified through a single division. But in terms of knowing, like, fishing for $16,000 worth of entry fees for a 9-event season is a lot bigger than, 5,700 or 5,500 entries for 3 events and calling it a good day. Having that extra expense, having the commitment of 9 weeks of travel for these events as well, it's going to breed a better angler, because they're going to be a lot wiser with their budgets. They're going to be a lot smarter on sponsorships. They're going to have more of a portfolio to go to companies with, possibly. And And hopefully, I said this on the Bass U podcast the other day, hopefully we created a second opens level without having to make a second opens level, because we still have that single division, which still funnels to the classic, and it still funnels out the same payouts, and you're still fishing against the great competition, but it's a way to get your feet wet. So if you don't know if you want to make the elites yet, go get your feet wet in a single division. If you do well enough in that division, you're going to have seed money to go do the extra entry the next year if you want to make the elite. So I like the way and the changes that we're doing, but it definitely breeded this year with 80 anglers doing 9 events. It definitely breeded some storylines and some anglers. And so doubling that next year, even though everyone on Facebook said it was going to be less people sign up for it, and we were terrible for doing it.
It's the death of the opens. Bass is done.
It doubled, and we're going to really see some storylines for sure come out, especially with the covers that we're probably going to be ended up doing with it.
No doubt about it. And I think that back to Kyle's original question too, something that people don't realize in the opens, I think, is so we got 175 fishing all 9. Obviously, there's still 50 other boats in there that are fishing. Every single division is full with a waiting list. And most of the time when you're sitting around, you're a bass head like we all are, you're looking at the tournament schedules as you come out. Ooh, Pickwick's on there. Ooh, Wheeler, like for this year in Division 1, the Wheeler.
I don't know if anybody's saying, ooh, Wheeler's in there, but it is a good time of the year.
They're saying that right now.
It is a good time.
It's on the rise right now.
It's good.
It's as good as we've seen it in a while. But I've got 50 buddies around North Alabama and Southern Tennessee where I live that are like, man, I can't. Well, I got to get in that Wheeler tournament, and you get that insert, region here. And so not only are you fishing against these hammers from that are fishing all 9, you're fishing against, if they can squeak in there, some of the best locals on these bodies of water too. So you're overcoming a lot to be competitive. And that's why sometimes I say, look, laying up and getting a 61st place finish at an event might be okay in the opens. And that's where a guy like Sam George, realizing that, hey, sometimes we got to punt here. I want all top 20s, top 10s, but sometimes it's okay because you just got to take what the lake gives you. And some of these places you go, you're just going to get beat, right? Like that's just going to happen with the locals. And that quote AAA level of bass fishing, there's a lot of that goes on, in particular, like the last events of the year. If a guy hasn't caught on the first 2, you may see some guys drop out in those single divisions. Well, that just invites more locals to go, hey, I moved up off the wait list. Let's go, and on a tough fishery, that can make a big difference, man. It really can. We've seen it knock some guys out of the classic, Well, I think about Sam George last year, like Oneida. He gets beat by a local there. It's just part of it. That's how it shakes out. As a guy that didn't fish all of them, and that's the interesting thing about this level. Something that I don't, and you guys haven't mentioned it yet. This is something that you mentioned it with Bobby a little bit, but for me, Bradley and I talked about it, and I had Ish Monroe on, who's coming back to the opens, leaving the Bass Pro Tour there, and of course Ish, we all know Ish, very confident guy, confident angler, but for me mentally, when you're used to that, no matter what trail you're on, maybe you've been on the elites and you didn't requalify, and then you got to go back to the opens, or, hey, I'm going to a life change. I'm going to try to go back to bass. I've been over here doing my thing, but now I want to work my way back up. You've been fishing for those $10,000 checks, right? You've had the live coverage opportunities. So when you've been at that level mentally, it's hard to process for me. Now I've got to climb this mountain. And if I get a check, they're not what they were at that level, right? And I'm fighting 225 boats. I wonder for some of these guys how that does seep in if you're event 3 or 4 and you're buried down there in 80th in the overall standings. Like mentally, you're like, did I screw this up?
And I'll say there's the egos that come with being a really great angler, being an elite or one of the best 150 anglers over the 2 pro levels. You get that kind of egotistical mindset of like, well, I am better than everyone in the opens. I've been a pro for a long time. It's going to be a cakewalk. And when it's tough and you barely make it or whatever it is, even guys who made it through the opens and they currently fish the elites, they said, I can't wait to make the elites because I'm going to wipe the floor with these guys that we've never heard their names before. And I'm like, buddy, I didn't see you on a day 4 once this year. I saw you on a day 3 times this year. It ain't easy coming back because these guys who you didn't know have been putting in the work. And so, yeah, when you go to the opens, you have to come almost humbly to the king. Here I am doing my best because these guys are ready and they're hungry as well. There are some guys who have fished for $4,500 checks for 10 years and they are tired of it. They're ready to fish for $10,000 checks. So they're trying to make this stuff up too. But Kyle and I were just
the king. Not to
Hank,
interrupt you, but is Hank the king that you have to humbly come to? Is Hank Well? Is that Hank Well?
Oh yes, 100%, 100%.
Hank is the king.
There will be memes made of this.
You don't have to kneel as far down because he's a littler fella. You don't have to kneel as far down to get to his eye level.
I did not say it, Hank Weldon. I did not say it.
I love Hank. But I'll say this: we were just talking about Larry Nixon, and I know you'll probably have some stories about him. We're going to get into the opens in just and the guys who qualified for the elites this year. Our field of 13 new guys, 14 new guys joining the Elite Series. But before we do that, let's talk about that open schedule just a little bit. I mean, what's really cool with Hank Weldon, and he proved this with the college series. We went to a lot of diverse places. He put Chattooga on the map when no one knew about Chattooga. We did some other different things that were tough events, but like they're ones that are memorable. We went to a lot of different places back in the day with Hank, and now that he's on the opens, we don't have to weigh in at Bass Pro Shops necessarily anymore. Like contractually, we always had the final day weigh-ins at Bass Pro Shops. That might not be a thing going forward where we have to weigh in at a Bass Pro Shops, which means now it opens it up to places that don't have a Bass Pro within 150 miles, and you could go to these places. So there's a couple, I'm going to throw out a couple lakes. It's not going to be, step by step on there, but when you've got places like Eufaula and the Harris Chain in the fall, you've got Wheeler on there. You get Bugs Island, St. Lawrence River, Watts Bar. Then when we go over to other divisions, you've got Eufaula, Oklahoma. You've got Lake of the Ozarks, Toledo Bend in the spring. That's a good 9 events. It's a very cool stretch as well where you're fishing regionally. And so we get to have the old school Bugs Island. We get to have a Eufaula, Oklahoma. We haven't had, I don't think we've had an open at Eufaula, Alabama. If we have, it's been a long time.
I fished Toledo one there in 2002, I believe.
2002.
If you look somewhere near the bottom of the standings, I was there.
But you were like 12 fishing those, so you were young.
Yeah, I was like 19 or 20 years old. Yeah, no business being there, but there was no college events. Shame on Bass back then.
Yeah, exactly.
I blame you.
I was about to say this is Ronnie's fault somehow.
Yeah,
it's got to be Ronnie and Hank and Chris Bose, somebody.
He was 9 years old.
I was 9, and I'm trying to email Bass. When are we going to do this one for the youngsters?
I don't think anybody works there that was there when I fished. I don't think there's anybody around anymore.
So those 9 events. Tell me a couple that when you looked at that schedule, whether you're deciding to look at it from an angler's perspective or just an excitement to see a lake we haven't been to in a while. There's a couple on there that are pretty new to the Bassmaster scene and haven't been around for a while.
Yeah, man, I love Bugs Island being on there. Growing up as a bass fishing nut, Bassmaster nut, reading in Bassmaster magazine, watching it on TNN back in the day, Bugs Island was always one of these places that just jumped out at me that, man, I got to go there. They're in the bushes, they're flipping and spinner baiting. And then you'd have guys like Gerald Beck offshore cranking, a big Pose 300 crankbait, probably like 7 feet deep cranking it. We thought we were cranking deep back then, but that's one of those historical fisheries that, a guy like Jacob Rosnick cut his teeth on, and so many East Coast guys, it was in regional events, it was always on the schedule. John Cruz, a guy that's had a lot of experience.
Rick
there.
Morris.
So I thought
Rick Morris.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that edition this year was really cool. I was glad to see Wheeler. Pickwick gets its in Gunnersville kind of overshadow Wheeler. Wheeler's really a dynamic fishery. I know the weights have not been what people, come to the Tennessee River for,
which is fine. It's good to have a little different, Yeah,
it's full of fish, but the unique thing about Wheeler is it's really big. It's a premier smallmouth fishery now, and it was known as that really in the 80s, and then it got grass and these big giant largemouth kind of took center stage. The last couple of years, it is really kicking out some big stringers of smallmouth. Now the grass is back. That one's going to be one to watch. gonna kind of be around that post spawn, maybe a shad spawn deal. We'll see weight wise, but it's really been fantastic the last couple of seasons. But
I think we went
it's
there
always
also. The last time we were at Wheeler for the elites was right around that time. We were at Bull Shoals in April, and then we switched over to Wheeler the next week. So hopefully it's something similar. But you can also see all three species play there as well. There'll be some spots weighed in that are, you're like, wow, that's a hammer spot.
No doubt about it. But I think seeing those old school, the Toledo bends, bugs, I love Lake of the Ozarks. I don't think there's been an open there or an invitational in years and years and years. So I think that one being on there in the fall, I love the fall events. Florida in the fall, it's a wild card. I like going, with the MPFL, man, we were down there at like Kissimmee in November. Nobody does that. And they smashed them. It opened my eyes to how good the fishing is down there this time of year. We're always January, February, March down in Florida, and the fishing can be fantastic, but you're susceptible to those fronts. And in the fall, you really don't get that. So Harris, they'll crush them there.
That's where we set the college record. I think it was like 84 pounds, Kyle. Like Cole Sands, one of our Elite Series rookies next year, won that event with Connor DeMauro. And second place averaged 20 pounds a day and got beat by 20 pounds like that. That's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, that. And then, like you said, I like going to the Ozarks and places like that in the fall, because when fall fishing's tough, man, what do you want to do? You just want to lock like a topwater in hand and just go for 5. And so that's kind of a deal there. You do get some St. Lawrence action in there. I like starting the year out in Alabama in March instead of starting out in Florida or something like that. And hopefully this
format be a good event too.
There'll be this format with the opens as well. It'll open up places like Texoma, Kyle, or maybe Beaver Lake again, or a Bull Shoals. Some of these places were close to getting, opens bids, and hopefully some of these places, not those that I specifically mentioned, but there are ones that are close that would have been the 10th or 11th stop if we had that many. Maybe we'll go to Texas. We'll do some of those lakes as well. But yeah, 225 boats. It's hard to pick some lakes that can hold it, other than just going to a Smith Lake all the time or something like that. But yeah.
That has to be taken into consideration when you go to schedule. Everybody wants to get on Facebook and talk about schedules. This lake pops up. This lake. There are so many things that go into those decisions for sure. And size of the lake definitely has to play in the opens.
No question. Yeah. And that's one thing Ronnie mentioned there. And you brought up as well, Luke, with Lake of the Ozarks and, those White River lakes. Obviously that's not a White River lake, but that area of the country seems like we've been so absent. It's gotten to the point, I feel like the bass officials are no different than the officials in any other sport. And they're just trying to screw over Arkansas any way they can. And I mean, that's just the direction we're heading here. And I'm about sick of it. So I'd like to see a tournament on the White River at some point in time, whether it be Table Rock or Bull Shoals, anywhere, Beaver, who cares? Somewhere.
Washita. Out there, Washita out there.
Yes.
I've got a lot of dear friends in that Hot Springs area, and man, that place has been this spring, in particular, this past spring, kicking out some impressive weights.
That's where I'm from. I'm from Hot Springs, so I mean, naturally, Hamilton's not big enough, of course, for an Elite Series tournament, but Washita's plenty big enough. In the early 2000s, there were some bass events there, and that would be one of those places you could, especially pre-spawn, talk about like February, that time frame. If you wanted to have a tournament where it wouldn't be so cold, it would be unbearable, but the weights would be huge. Like you could do it there, and it would shock some people for sure. But then you could have a tournament there like the Forest Wood Cups in August or July, and it would be like, wow, this lake is the worst in the country. It's the worst lake in the entire world.
Just a quick sidebar. You said Forest Wood Cup. I fished one there as a co-angler. I qualified in 2015. Shane LaHue, Bassmaster Elite Series pro, almost killed me in that event. He hit a piece of standing timber while he was fishing brim beds with his trail motor on 3,000%, and almost broke my neck in his boat. I did break his net that day. I was back there just like on Facebook or something because you couldn't get a bite. So I was just happy to be there. And I caught a keeper on his first stop. They were schooling. He goes, "You might want to get a bite quick because the rest of the day I'm doing." And I caught one. And I was like, didn't zero in the Forest Wood Cup. Awesome. He puts me in the middle of the floor of the boat. I flip. Like head over feet. So that was the last time I was on. I was on Washita, and I have PTSD because of Shane LaHue.
It's I've talked to Kyle about that, and I would love to I don't want the job at all of making the schedule, but I would love to almost have like a show of we make our schedule of just places we haven't been to. We've thrown it around, places we haven't been to more than 2 times in the last 10 years, and just new places. But I'm glad to see we got 4 places that are relatively new on the elite schedule next year. And obviously the opens, we've got 4 or 5 that are either new locations or places we haven't been in a long time, or places we've been to a lot that it's a different time of the year, like Florida in the fall. And so I'm excited to bring Toledo Bend back. I know that area of the country is just starving for the industry again. You know, it's so crazy. Places like Paris, Tennessee, places like Manny, Louisiana, these places are made for tournaments. Like this is a city that was, like I like to say, East Carolina, where I went to school. Greenville is only a town because we have a college there. That is what it was for. Some of these places only are towns because of the lakes and the fishing community there. That's how they're formed, and that's how they'll last. And so it's a sad day when I guess it's January in Manny, Louisiana, and the Mexican restaurant there on the corner of the 4-way, it's empty. That's not what you want to see. And so I'm glad we're going back to some of those places as well. But let's get what we wanted to bring you on for today and talk about some guys that you know pretty well and what we'll expect from them. We've talked to, I'm just going to read off the list again like I did with Kyle, but Alex Wetherell, Kioya Fujita, Keith Poche, Bryant Smith, Cooper Gallant, Joey Cifuentes, Bradley Hallman, Logan Latuso, Kyle Norsetter, Cole Sands, David Gaston, John Suckup, Will Davis Jr., and Larry Nixon. Those are the 14 new guys on the Elite Series next year. They'll all have 2 years to be able to fish on the Elite Series, except for Larry Nixon. He's got 3 because he's a legend exemption. Unless he made it on his own through qualification, he has at least 3 years to fish. But tell me a couple of those names that stand out to you. We've already talked to Alex Wetherell on the podcast. He's been a long-time opens guy. He was against the 9-event deal because he's been a single division or a double division guy, not all 3. I said, why don't you just go ahead and get it done this year? You don't have to worry about all 9. He did that. He won the Northern Opens points race. Got some other guys that did just single divisions. But overall, some of these guys were touring pros in the past or currently this year, and they really made that jump to try to make the Elite Series. And I know a couple fished the NPFL with you guys this year.
I think out of that list, this is no offense to the guys I don't know or don't have any history with, but a guy that I really believe with all I have, and I've had him on the show, he's somebody I think a lot of, got to know him. He is a professional in every sense of the word. You guys will experience that with him next year, big time. That's Bryant Smith from California. He is so unbelievably consistent. Now, he might not be a guy that hoists a blue trophy, but man, he is a guy that could absolutely make a lot of classics. You know, I would be very surprised if he doesn't come out of the gate firing with some great finishes. He is he's that guy. Talking, NPFL guys, of course, John Sokup, man, look, he won the first event. He won 2 events in our inaugural season. The guy knows how to win. And he kind of, in the beginning, when I was getting to know all those guys, he was just, it's electronics. He's an electronics guru, live scope guy. But we saw him win with a flipping stick. I've seen him frog, and I've seen him, he's an Oklahoma guy. I mean, he can do it all. So he's very versatile, but he knows how to win. He's a very confident guy as well. He won't roll up to the first event next year and be nervous. That's not John's deal. He has a swagger about him for sure. You'll experience that. And David Gaston, he's a guy that, man, for us over there, kind of a roller coaster. He was leading angler of the year last year going into the 4th event and then fell off, but he was in the top 5, I think, at the first 3 out of 4 tournaments. And he's always doing it his way. He reminds me of a John Cox in that he's going to throw a frog, a frog, a frog, a frog, and a chatterbait and a swim jig. And like, that's what he would do. And he would make it work. Even in places you're like, well, David won't catch him this week. And then he's in second, at Pickwick, we're there in the summer. And I'm like, they're going to be catching them out. No, he found some in the grass on a chatterbait and he almost won the freaking thing. It was just, that's his deal. So,
and he's
those
young.
3 guys, don't let the beard
for
David
anglers, do it.
Very good.
was gonna say, don't let the beard, don't let
That's
the
right.
beard
No,
distract you. He's like 25, I think.
Yeah, he's a young man, and also, fished the FLW tour for a few years there. He's got that experience in the bigger events. He's not a guy that's going to get rattled at all. He's going to show up confident. Will Davis Jr. is a young man that just snuck in there through the Federation event. I think Will is looking at y'all's schedule, like with Lay Lake on there, and you guys may have already talked about this. Will knows that pond. So does David Gaston. I mean, we throw out local experience sometimes at the national level because, home lake curse. But man, those boys know that place.
Makes you a
That's
lot
what's crazy.
more comfortable, Kyle.
Yeah, no question. It's interesting you brought those two up because I was actually going to talk about that. What's so funny is moving here to Birmingham just a couple of years ago, I obviously don't get to fish a ton of tournaments, but get to fish enough to know who the sticks are and the hammers are. And, it's crazy because the guys you would expect to make it, some of them still haven't. And then there's guys like David. I didn't really know David super well before this year, to be completely honest. And I've got to talk to him a few times, and he's super, super neat guy. But I've lived here for 2 years and had never even heard of David, and now he's going to fish the Elite Series. That's just like shows you how deep the talent is in this area. And it's not like this just happened. I mean, let's be honest, Alabama, naturally has been like this for a long time. But no, it's you could speak to that for sure, being up here from Alabama or living in Alabama as well.
And I think he made like 4 top 10s in the opens this year, almost in a row. Like, you think he did he did like 5 top 10s. I think he did Ross Barnett, Red River, Hartwell, Upper Chesapeake, and he maybe had one early in the year, but that's a wide variety of places. And like you said, it was a popper and a chatterbait and a flipping stick, and it's cool to see that. But
yeah,
there's some other guys like Joey Cifuentes coming over from the tour.
Yeah,
you know him just from being around there, and I'll be 100%. Joey, I've texted everybody or called him. Like, Will Davis has the flu, so RIP to him, because I had it last week. I feel you, buddy. He sounded like he had the flu, so I was like, get better, and at least it's happening now and not in February. But everybody's kind of getting ready for the season, and Joey has seemingly been one of the most prepared anglers, like asking me questions that rookies don't ask me or new guys don't ask me. And I know that he's been a pro before, but I will say, and I'll tell it to his face, I used to say, who in the heck is this goofy dude with a cowboy hat at all these? I was like, this boy don't look like a cowboy ranch hand to me if you had to ask me. Well, why in the heck? And also, how inconvenient is it with the wind? That sucker's going to blow off your... And so I always used to be like, is this a gimmick? Is this guy a gimmick, or is he going to be able to catch him? And then I see his name pop up in events, and also I learned how to pronounce his name and all that jazz. And then you got...
Fun to say.
You got a cowboy hat, you got a long last name that's hard to say, and your first name's Joey. And I'm like, I don't know how to read this dude. And he's from B Branch or wherever it is in Arkansas. I'm like, I really don't have a gauge on this guy, but he seemingly came to the plate really prepared. And he knows what pitches that the pitcher's going to throw. And so I'm excited to see how he does. But do you have any knowledge about Joey just from traveling around and competing against him? Maybe he's cut you off a time or two you want to say or whatever.
No, so Joey was fishing co-angler the year I did. And the interesting thing about Joey that I find that when you look up to mentors in life, or you find coaches, and we all have those, right? That whether, no matter the sport, but in bass fishing in particular, we all have someone that kind of taught us the way. Larry Nixon taught him the way. Okay. Like Larry Nixon has been his life coach in bass fishing and kind of got him into it, introduced through a family friend. And Joey played baseball in school. And when he looked for something to kind of scratch that competitive itch, and bass fishing became it. Well, he traveled with Larry on the tour as a co-angler, practiced with Larry, learned with Larry. And man, my goodness, I mean, we're talking about the general of bass fishing, the first ever $1 million winner, bass fishing millionaire. And what a great way to get exposed to the fast track of being successful.
Sign me up for that.
No doubt. I'm like, how did I miss where you got, the sign up for that, for sure. But that's
it's
something
like
about
Cody Huff and Rick Clunn.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Yeah, I had Cody on the show after he won a college event a couple years ago, and he brought that up, and I was like, wait a second. What did you just say?
He,
Rick Clun's your
he
bud?
saved Rick
What?
Clunn's son and gets to be that's how they become connected. That's crazy.
Insane, man. But with Joey, and not taking anything away from Joey's abilities, because he has really morphed into his own angler, and he'll tell you that he does a lot of things that Larry doesn't, and I've talked to Larry about this, and Larry learns things from Joey, in the ways of forward facing sonar, and a lot of things are changing. But man, just that gut, watching somebody like Larry Nixon, can you imagine from the back deck of his boat the things you pick up? So I think Joey will do well. He is very prepared. He's a worry wart. I like to give him a lot of mess over that, but like he's saying, he's reaching out to you. He wants to be prepared. He doesn't want to screw up. As long as his cowboy hat doesn't blow in the lake in front of you and Zona, he'll be okay.
I told him, he said, hey, do you have any numbers from the Elite Series this past season so I can present them to a non-endemic and hopefully get a deal and I'll be good to go? I'm trying to get one more deal. And I said, just so you know, if I send you these numbers, I get 5% of whatever this deal is that you're talking about, because I've facilitated and asking them. And I told Kyle I'd give him 1 or 2%, I'd divvy it out. But no, I joked with him about that. But yeah, you always wonder about that. And you also wonder about, it's a lonely road. Who is Bryant Smith going to room with? Maybe he likes to camp by himself. Joey and Larry balancing the talking and sharing. It seems like there have been some teams formed over the last few years. And sometimes it's the hardest thing as a rookie to find a guy to trust. And I often tell these guys, hey, they put their pants on, most of them, the same way you do, unless they're just a weirdo and they do it differently, But I said, most of these guys, they do it the same way. Well, Lulu helps Swindle put them on, so I'm not saying that's a wrong way to do it either. But
wear too.
Exactly. But literally, she puts the hot glue on the bedazzles and everything on there. But so finding that comfort of a traveling partner to kind of have that, to ease into it, or having someone you can trust. And I often tell these guys, just go talk to a guy at a boat ramp. Meet one new elite guy every day of practice or the tournament day at the boat ramp and introduce yourself and say, hey, they're not going to be a jerk, most of them. And if they are, you're fast-tracked yourself and weeded him out of your equation. You don't have to worry about that guy anymore. But that's some balance that these guys are going to have to do. So for Joey, having a traveling guy that kind of makes it at the same time, that's perfect for that.
Oh, that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch with those two, I feel like, all year. And having Larry back is just such a blessing for you guys, man. That dude is, you said he gets to fish 3 years. Hey, I'm going to make an executive decision on behalf of he can stay forever.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Kyle, do you have any guys that you're interested about that maybe Luke has a story about? Because we talked about 3 MPFL guys. We talked about Will Davis Jr., Larry Nixon, Joey Cifuentes. We talked about half of our guys, but there are a couple former elite pros that are going to be coming back. And I think that before, I let Kyle jump in for any questions. What do you think about that, Luke, for Keith Poche and Bradley Hallman? I told Kyle this the other day. We don't cover bass fishing like other sports do. Like, it's all positive. We hardly ever criticize guys. It's not ESPN First Take and are we going to ridicule this guy's decision today? It's always seemingly like, if a dude loses, we talk about the winner. If a guy gets DQ'd, we explain the rule and then we talk about the winner. But we're never critical on guys. But Poche and Hallman, they had their moments, but for the most part, they were a Brian Snowden, which nothing wrong with Brian. He's catching a stray bullet on the podcast.
Shout out to Brian Snowden, Ronnie.
just a 50th place average, just out of 100, he's a guy who's going to be here forever, but never maybe makes the splash in the deep end like everyone wants or expects him to. That's kind of how Poche and Hallman were. They had their moments, but do you expect them to be different coming back to the Elite Series, different mindset, or are they going to fall like they are who we thought they were, kind of thing?
Well, I know this won't age well, and I know you. If I'm wrong on this, you'll pull this back out at some point.
We're already clipping it.
I know that. I know how this goes with you two. But man, Poche's on fire right now. I mean, my goodness, it's ridiculous. I think the Elite schedule sets up very well for Keith. He's pulling double duty. So I always, in the back of my mind, I worry about that for a guy. It's a lot of events, a lot of big events.
17, 16, 15.
It's an enormous undertaking. We saw Cox, do it. And yeah, he made the classic, got in by the hair on his chin there. But it was close, and we saw him have some really John Cox like events in that season as well. I remember at Pickwick he finished almost dead last. Just mind blown.
Yeah, Neely Henry
was
as
the
well.
case
Yeah.
with John. Yeah. So I worry about that with a guy like Keith, but I think Keith is more seasoned now than he was in his first go round. I don't know Keith that well, but I do know Bradley very well. Bradley's somebody I talk to on a regular basis, and I can tell you from the Bradley Hallman I met around 2011 when he was on his way out to now, he's a completely different human between the years. And he was burned. He was spent. He was ready to go, ready to be out of bass fishing when he quit the Elite Series. He got out, and when he came back in 2016 and started poking around over there in the FLW tour, and he wins the first event back, overcomes adversity on the final day. His trolling motor goes out. He just pulls up in a grass mat, just catches them anyways, wins $100,000. Then he wins at Lanier with spotted bass. I talked to him about this on the podcast. That win to me was just incredible because he's the last guy anybody would have ever picked. Like, he was not on any fantasy fishing teams to win Lanier, and he blows it out with this really unique pattern, 23-pound bag of spots on the first day. So Bradley, I think, and you can hear it talking to him, I think this go round is going to be different. I really do. We've seen the consistency in the opens. I'm really, really proud to see him back over there and see how this shakes out.
Two quick questions. What do you think Keith Pochet's boat situation is going to be like? Because we know when he's in the opens, he gets to fish out of a different rig, and he'll die on that rig at St. Clair, Champlain, or St. Lawrence if he does that. So he can't run that rig all year. Right. And you have to use the same rig or a rig of acceptable model. If he busted up a boat, you got to get a 20-foot fiberglass because you had that, that kind of thing. A synonymous model. Do you think the boat decision is going to be tough for him to fish his style that he was so successful with? And then my other question is, who's Bradley Hallman going to travel with? Because he kind of is leaving his buddies because he made it. You know what I'm saying? And so it's going to be a brand new travel situation that he's had the last 6 years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I can answer that for Brad. On the Pochet thing, I mean, that goes into that 2-tour deal. I mean, it's just the risk you take in fishing both. So, and with your rule, he's going to have to be careful what he picks, but I think he fishes out of an aluminum rig, right? Like a Gator Trax. I think he fishes out of that no matter what. But I know in the opens, he fishes out of the Bambino, the little small
compact
jumper. Yeah. The Kinu or whatever. So I don't know. I think that certainly with the big water portion of the schedule, the northern swing there, you don't want to be running around with a tiller handle up there. So I don't know how that'll go. He's gonna have to choose carefully. It will be for sure, but I think that early part of the season really suits Keith, though. I think that he's going to make some noise. But on the Rumen situation with Bradley, I believe he's going to be with John Soko. So they stayed together in some of the opens this year. But I wondered that, and he and I have talked about it. Bradley also roomed with Scott Martin. He and Scott are close, and they room together in the opens, and they stay in touch, on a regular basis. But Scott's got Canterbury and my twin brother Matt Airby, with him all the time. So I think him and John Sokup, I think that's the plan right now. The two Okies.
I just have to bring this up. So you're talking about if he fishes that boat up in those northern events. I was thinking about this. There's no doubt the first day of the tournament of St. Clair, just pick one of those, he's going to get a 90-year-old Marshall that's got to go out there with that boat, and it's going to be something else to see. I sure hope that doesn't happen, but it's going to work out that way somehow, some way. That's the way
he's going to say, hey, do you have an extra life jacket? Because we're going to the middle of Lake Huron or whatever. And then he's going to take off.
I do wonder that, and I know that he's fished out of fiberglass plenty, 20, 21 foot boat, but I do know that's a different way of approaching it. You know what I'm saying? Like if you caught, like, just getting away from people, having, you know how important that is in tournaments, Kyle and Luke, that getting away from people, and he had areas in opens and even probably some other events that were off the grid, like his series. And so not having a spot where you can go catch 5 fish that no one else can fish, that's just different, a different kind of mindset and clarity. But that's just something else I wanted to put in there, Kyle.
Yeah, I think with Keith, going back to him just real quick, he, in his early days on the Elite Series, he was all fiberglass, and something changed with Keith, and he made that switch to aluminum a few years ago with a different brand than he's with now.
Yeah,
and I think he's adopted more of that. He was always a shallow water guy, right? But I think that when you first come into the Elite Series or the top level of the sport, no matter where you're at, you try to chase things. Hallman talked about this on the podcast as well. You got to do you ultimately, right? You can't get caught up in, oh, they're catching them on a spy bait. If you've never thrown a spy bait, you're not going to learn that in 3 days of practice and then go beat some Jay Shakur at, throwing a spy bait. You're not going to. You can forget it. He's caught more on it than you have, right? But I think Keith has really came into his own. And hey, I'm a Louisiana guy. I like to fish in the dirt, and it's what I'm going to do. And it's working for him, obviously. I mean, dude, he caught him at, think about the James River is, yes, it's a shallow fishery, but we see guys, they're going to run to the Chickahominy. They've got to go, 5,000 miles to catch a bass. Dude, he was right there in the mix the whole time at that event. Chesapeake, I believe he caught him up there as well. So I think he'll be fine. We can pick it to death, but it's going to be interesting to see what boat he does pick. But I think he'll catch him.
You made the point there. I mean, what he did this last season should really open more people's eyes than maybe it should, because I literally was sitting there. Admittedly, me and Ronnie were shooting a podcast, and Ronnie was talking about something. I started daydreaming about the fact that Keith O'Shea was able to do what he did in that boat all year long, and for the longest time, you look at John Cox and guys like that, and you're like, well, maybe it's just a one of one. But I mean, if that's your deal, I mean, that's a big advantage in some tournaments. I mean, there's clearly tournaments, like those super big water places where it might be a bit of a disadvantage. But like you said, doing your own thing, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, I run a 20-foot Ranger, but I'd probably be better suited for aluminum boat because I'm going to go places where aluminum boat would be a bigger advantage anyways. So, I mean, for some guys, it's going to be interesting. I think a lot of guys have a hard time to get away with, away from that. And obviously I'm looking at an express sign on the back of your, so this is all, we can all tailor this however you want. But for some guys, I mean, it just makes more sense. I mean, it really does. If you're not going to get out there and do that stuff anyways, are you really at a disadvantage to, be running an aluminum boat of any sort?
Yeah. Well, and we've seen it with Jason Christie. My goodness, he ran a Ranger for years. He put 3 big trophies on the shelf, the biggest trophies, out of a 21-foot aluminum boat. So, they have their advantages. They have their disadvantages at times, right? I mean, that's obviously, but like you said, I grew up in a 16-foot aluminum boat. So I'm more comfortable in like getting up there this deep, more so than I'm not. I also grew up lead fishing with my dad some too, but I like to get up there and knock the blades off of trolling motor props and ruin lower units. I'm good at it, actually. I'm better at that than I am at catching fish shallow.
Kyle knows I have a 21.5-foot Phoenix, and the bottom of the boat says it's an 18-foot aluminum. So
yes,
and the old Minn Kota Ford Trex that was about 18 years too long that I used it. It said the same thing. But no, that's the thing that's interesting. And what's cool is looking at the rest of the guys who qualified through the opens. Looking at Kyoya Fujita, I look forward to getting to know his style a little bit more. I talked about this with Kyle. Kenta Kimura is a guy who's been around for a long time, but when these guys ask me who or what the Japanese anglers are good at, you just want to say finesse techniques, and it almost is racist because like they're good. Yeah, of course they're good with a spinning rod, of course, blah, blah, blah. But Kenta is a cranker. Kenta is a big swim bait guy. Kenta is a big spoon. Kenta's different. And so I don't want to assume anything about Kyoya Fujita. And I'll say this, he's 20-something years old. all these guys, Daisuke Aoki, Kenta, Taku's mid-30s. These guys are older when they came over here. Yoey is young. He is, if there's ever a prodigy, it would be him because he's won so much and he's barely, in his mid-20s. So I look forward to knowing a little bit more about him. Bryant Smith, like you said, Mr. Bucky's himself.
Loves the Buckies.
He loves the Buckies. And so I already have tagged him in one of when I stopped at a Bucky's. I was like, figured I'd see Bryant Smith here, but it is 1 a.m. So I guess he's not at this one. He's at some other one. But
they just opened one 15 minutes from TH Marine, by the way, just a sidebar.
Ooh,
and
nice.
I'm now broke. I'm broke because of it. I'm a big Bucky's guy.
But you do have groceries for the next week based on what you got there. So they employ more people than Walmart does at each location at Bucky's. There was like 82 people running around at midnight the other day when I was there, but
they pay them too.
We don't
go down that rabbit hole, but they pay them too.
I'm going to be the car wash manager at Bucky's in Athens, Alabama. Just if you need me next year, by the way. I've already applied. Continue, Ron.
And then looking at some of the other guys, Cooper Gallant. I mean, you were talking about back in the day with not having a college series or a high school series to fish when you were a young whippersnapper. Like I covered Cooper Gallant in the high school championship in 2015, and now he's on the Elite Series, and he's had a shot at winning a couple opens. He's been close. I look forward to seeing him.
He won at Cherokee.
Oh, yeah, he won. Yes, but like the year before, the year before when he got second or third to Corey at the St. Lawrence, he was close, and then he fired up and was like, "I'm going to fish all of them because of that." And so you got Logan Latuso. He's son of former Elite Series pro. He's been the first guy to the Opens 2 or 3 years of qualifying. Now he gets it done. And then a guy we mentioned, Cole Sands, won the college championship. He's been in a couple brackets. He came short on winning that individual award, but he's proven it. And he lives on the Tennessee River, so he knows how to catch them on places that we're going to go to for sure, because those are popular bodies of water. But one thing about that is cool is Jacob Fouts. I was with him the other day, and he said, I don't know how many Elite Series pros where the guy went to the same college and high school as another Elite Series pro, because him and Cole Sands went to the same high school and the same college, and they both went to, obviously, Bryan College right there in Dayton, Tennessee. And the last guy is Kyle Norsetter, finished third, or I think he finished second or third in the Centrals. And he's a guy I really don't know much about, but the way he fished, his style, and he's from Wisconsin, I've automatically got to assume he's good, because the Midwest guys that have came out from Minnesota and Wisconsin the last 5 years, man, it is just, they're so well versed. They have immediate success, and they have star potential, even with their personalities not lining up with what prototypical stars have been in the past. So that is an interesting field of guys. And we had covered this already on the podcast before you jumped in, Luke, that we didn't have to cut anybody this year. There was a vote mid-season to go from around 90 to 100. So we added people to the field. A couple people retired. A couple people were classified as medical exemptions because of injuries that they sustained, couldn't finish the season out, or had to miss some events. And so it ends up, we didn't have to cut anybody. We'll be at 104. And we've gone back to the way we used to be, where if you're in the top 70 in points in AOY, you're safe no matter what. Your average for your career doesn't matter. If you have something to earn every year. If you win the last event of the season, you can still make the Classic, even if you've had a terrible year. If you've had a terrible year, you could still make the top 70 in points and qualify for the Elite Series the next season and keep going. So that'll provide some relief for some guys that have had a couple tough years that were on that worrisome chopping block. But then it also allows a little bit more freedom to these Elite Series rookies, that you can have a 90th place finish in points the first year, and you don't have to go finish 30th the next year to get your average up to where it needs to be. You just have to finish in the top 70 to make it. So a couple different changes there for next year. But overall, I mean, we say it every year, another tough class, maybe the toughest of all time, all that stuff. We'll continue to say that, because the more we learn about these Opens guys, the more we'll learn that there are 40 or 50 we never talk about that have been ready, and when they get their chance, they'll be ready.
Absolutely. And somebody I forgot to mention, you brought him up there, that I feel terrible for not saying his name in my earlier rant, is Coop Gallant. That I didn't know him until this year, and I met him in the Southerns. He is an impressive young man, and he gets it. from all aspects. And I think he is definitely ready. I mean, just look, first year to fish all night, and he just, I'm just gonna go make the elites and make the classic. Yeah, no big deal. And I'm telling you, we saw Gussie win over there in Knoxville doing the Canadian thing on the smallmouth. Of course, it's been, widely documented, but that's kind of what Coop was doing up there at Cherokee. You might want to watch him in Knoxville.
I'll say you could clip this, Kyle. Ain't no way someone wins the classic with 15 smallmouth at Knoxville. If they do, I will be wrong again, because there was no way someone was going to win the elite with 20 smallmouth.
Somebody make sure you get me that. Somebody make sure you get me that on March the 26th or whatever.
Coop, if you're going to win the classic, just go catch a largemouth on your run back in the final day. Just one largemouth. That's all it takes.
That time of year, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it'll be 15.
But I do think people are going to go look at Teleco a little bit more, and they're going to explore some stuff. Maybe we'll have some stability in weather, because if we remember that classic last time, people were texting me wondering if we were going to cancel it and move it, because all of a sudden it flooded up into the streets of Knoxville. And then all of a sudden they sucked it so far down that it was low and 2 feet low during the tournament. I'm like, it was in the streets last week. And so hopefully we have some stability there, but we'll see some different places play. But Kyle, do you have anything for Luke before we wrap it up in the next couple of minutes?
Yeah. So on the topic of Knoxville, I'm just going to pour some gasoline on the fire and let it burn. Alabama being ranked over Tennessee in the college football playoff. How do we feel about that?
Listen, it's been a long 24 hours at my house since that officially came out. First of all, I don't know who's saving, if Kirk Herbstreit makes this decision, I don't know. He's not a Tennessee guy. That's what all the ball chatter is. Kirk Herbstreit did this to us because he thought Vanderbilt was just going to walk all over us. Ultimately, I think it stinks. But if we don't let the South Carolina Gamecocks act like we had never played football before, then it's not even a conversation. We're in the college football playoff. So, it's on the Vols at this point. But I'm a little frustrated with that, since head to head, we win that, right? Well, even though it's a field goal, whatever, I'm like, I don't know how that doesn't factor in somehow in the decision. I guess they're looking at both of their losses were very close. I don't know. I think we can all agree that the college football playoff needs to be expanded a little bit.
Oh, and it's going to. I think it's going to 12, right? I think it's going to 12.
Yeah.
My thing is this. Yeah, like Bama was one field goal from being 8-4, and they're also one field goal from being 12-0. And so, that's what's crazy is I think Alton Jr. was telling me that Brad Knight was heckling him because Baylor did not beat TCU the other day and lost by 1, and then Tennessee went and dropped an egg the next couple hours against South Carolina. But I think that's why it's not a Bama favor. I think it's you lose 2 games by 1 score, and then the 2 losses by Tennessee were you didn't get blown out by Georgia, but you never had a shot in that game, and then it was an ugly loss at South Carolina. It's just tough. But I think you lose your quarterback, right? You didn't have Hooker for that one.
Hooker played at South Carolina. He got hurt late.
Oh, that's right. The last quarter was Milton.
In the 4th. And
I was told was the second coming, even though we know all about him already, but we'll see.
Listen, I'll say this about Bazooka Joe, as they call it in Knoxville. I know you are. Bazooka Joe could throw it from my house to your house, Ronnie. That's the problem, though. He has the greatest arm strength I've ever seen. He's just overthrows everybody.
Yeah, just like Jalen Milroe, just like Malik Hornsby, just like we got a couple backup SEC quarterbacks that can do that.
Watching that Vanderbilt game, I'm pretty sure I watched him throw 3 passes out of the stadium.
For sure.
Over the receiver's head out of Vanderbilt Stadium.
Look, they were dead online, accurate, but just in the cheerleaders.
He was using his 3-wood and he needed his 9-iron. That's what it was.
I went to the Missouri game and they put him in late. He threw a 68-yard touchdown pass, and it looked like he did not even lean into it. It was one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed. It was like snap, and he's like, he didn't even put his weight into it. I'm like, there's no way he nailed it.
The one thing I will say in closing too on the college football playoff argument of the whole deal, I've heard some people say, well, they're considering they lost Hendon Hooker. I don't feel like you can do that. I don't feel like that's a reasonable excuse. Like, I
It's a
mean, as
different
if like
team,
they had
though. KJ Jefferson's
It
not on
is
the
a
field
different
for
thing.
Arkansas. That's a different team than it is with KJ on it. So that's a
but
different team.
there's at least a sample. There's a sample size of KJ not playing for Arkansas that would make you firmly know, without a shadow of a doubt, they're no good without him on the field. We don't really know yet as far as Tennessee is concerned, because they still put up 94 points or whatever they did against Vanderbilt with Joe
3,000
Milton.
yards of offense. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really know, so it's not fair to assume that they're significantly worse without Hendon Hooker. I mean, are they? Probably, but like you can't to me that's not fair in a head-to-head where Tennessee has the victory over Alabama and they're both 10-2. Like I don't think that's justifiable to use as a
Here's what I'll leave the podcast with this. Because I don't personally know a TCU fan, right? Let's just be honest.
There are none.
Let's just be honest. We're all SEC guys here. I know
Where
Ronnie's
is
Eastern Carolina.
Abilene? Where's Abilene?
I know where
at?
it's West Tech. Nobody, yeah, it's close to OH Ivy.
Oh, good. Oh,
we'll
yeah.
say that they may be good at live scoping out there, but when you look at the wins and losses for some of these SEC schools, we're just beating each other to death, right? Like I'm going TCU, play half of an SEC schedule and let's see you go undefeated. I say it every year when everybody's just so they're going to get their opportunity this year, most likely. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can run this one back in a month or so and be like, look, they rolled Georgia. They rolled whoever they end up playing. I just don't see it. I don't see it.
I just think that we got to let them in. We got to let them in because they had an undefeated they had a one-loss season or something a couple years ago. And with the whole Big 12 drama, no Big 12 title game, they lose out on the playoff because of that. I said, let's just have a stress-free weekend and have Georgia win, have Michigan win, have TCU win, and please let USC lose. And otherwise we'll just have an easy breezy. Most of the teams stay in the playoff. We don't have to do the what ifs. Tennessee can say, hey, we had 2 losses just like Bama, but we beat them, and just go home with that. We beat them. That's fine. But I will say, other than Championship Sunday of an Elite Series event, the only other days that make me happy is when the Vols lose. And it's mostly because you got Kevin Baxter and Crispin Powley on my feed that I got to sit there and mute them for a week. And so I just can't stand the fans. I'm sorry. I just can't stand the fans. It's not even Joe Milton.
Neither can I.
I hate it. I can't stand it. When they don't do well, it's the Vol bias and blah, blah, blah. And it's next year. And then when they do well, they're so overbearing. It's like, get out of here, man.
Listen, I've been a Tennessee fan, born and raised, whole life. And for me this year, what has made this special, even though you're a terrible human for talking bad about Tennessee, Ronnie.
Clip it and ship it. I'm going to mail it right to those 2 boys.
I know. My 15-year-old this year, I remember watching in 98 when we did win the last national championship we won last time. We were really relevant. And we've gone through so much since the Philip Fulmer era and I remember going to like Kiffin's first game and the energy and feeling that. And then he just popped the balloon when he left in the dead of the night. And then we went to purgatory for so many years with Derek Dooley and Butch Jones and Jeremy Pruitt. So to have that energy back up there, the game I got to go to this year, it's so much fun. But my 15-year-old is like dialed, man. He's just stats and looking at recruits and Dad, have you seen this? Nonstop. So this year for me has been as much fun as I've had with college football in a very long time. So it's hard for me to be, I'm upset that they didn't make the college football playoff, but I'm also a realist. I don't think that they would have survived it. I really don't. And a lot of Tennessee fans, we want our shot. We'll do this. Our offense can put up so many points, with a healthy Hendon. Our defense is trash at times. I mean, they're terrible. And so against the Michigan, we saw what they did against Georgia. Would I like to play Georgia in like a, even playing field situation where it's not? Yeah, of course. But Bama would probably like to have not played us at Neyland this year as well. You know what I mean? So the what ifs, I don't get into all that crap. It just is what it is. And it's been a really fun football season. Finally. For Tennessee fans for the first time in forever.
I'll say I know what that spark's like because I'm a transplant, now a Razorback fan. And my Pirates at ECU are still, one of my loves because I paid a lot of money to go there, and so I get the right to have two fan bases. But Arkansas, when they're down like 28-0 to Bama at halftime, and then they go and score like 23 straight or something in the third quarter, old Razorback Stadium was popping, and I was like, this is what it's like when 80,000 plus, like 80,000 people is standing, and it is loud. I was like, I can only imagine a night game between a top 5 matchup, and it would have been crazy. But yeah, needless to say, the best the Arkansas season happened was the first 3 games of the year, and then they got 3 the next 10 or whatever. It's crazy. I don't know how it happened.
Really a surprise though, man, because Pittman, he's awesome.
He's about to clean some house over there, boys. And we're going to find 4 DBs that are in COM 101 right now, and that we're going to get them on the football team because there's got to be 4 better DBs. Yeah. And I know all of the athletes are in communications because they were in my classes. So we got to find some athletes in communications 101 that they can just come and put in the secondary.
ECU must not have offered sports management as a degree, because that was one of my degrees. And I'm pretty sure I figured out about 3 classes in, I was like, this is not a real degree. People are just handing out degrees here.
No, they were all in common on journalism, PR.
Luckily, I got my business degree too, because I think people in the state of Arkansas would have looked at that and been like, well, you did really go to college.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Luke Dunkin, we appreciate you jumping in. It's a different vibe and a different guest, but I knew you'd have some perspective on some guys for our rookie class, and it's kind of a good way to just outline some of the changes and have a friend of the show as our support to kind of take some bullets with us, because that's what we got to do. But yeah, we got one more spot up for grabs at the team championship in Lake Hartwell next week, and we'll have maybe ABT will go back to back on taking the spot in the classic, because that's what they've done the last few years. We've had a couple child prodigy anglers do it, and maybe there'll be another child prodigy angler come from the ABT. Maybe Josh Butts will get it done. He's the feel-good story of America if he was to make it. Holy cow.
Listen, man.
And the only one to give Matt Robertson a run for his money too.
Well, I'll be honest, Butts has less of a mullet and more of just a beautiful mane, just the flow.
But he tucks his pants. He tucks his pants in his boots, and just it's the whole deal.
Josh is the real deal, man. He really is. He's I don't know. I forget how many ABT wins he has, and that's one of the toughest tournament trails in the country. But Butts is no joke. Of course, just won the championship down there. Their
college
ABT
winner
this year. Yeah, he's a good dude too. I would definitely be pulling for him at Hartwell.
Awesome, Kyle. You got anything before we go? I know you wanted to get your SEC talk in, so we did that. That was good.
I do not. Luke, I appreciate you a ton for joining on. This is one of the more fun podcasts we've done, and definitely knew it was going to be like that, so just appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys for asking. This is it's an honor to come on here and chat up, even though Ronnie, really, I'd like to say to Bassmaster HR, whoever's listening out there, you get control of your employee. Hurting my feelings with the Tennessee hate. I need less of that, Ron.
You're not going to be able to get that because they're either Auburn, Alabama, or Arkansas.
Oh, I know, that's right.
So they're like, actually, we're going to give you a bump in pay, Ronnie. Appreciate you for doing that, taking stray bullets at the Vols. But no, it's always fun, and it's got to be refreshing to be on this side of the podcast instead of being the one responsible leading the show. So.
Yeah, awesome. I've actually got to record one this afternoon though with Scott Martin, so I gotta tighten up a little bit.
That's crazy. We've got one this afternoon with Scott Martin now. All of a sudden, Kyle, you free? We're gonna. I'm just kidding.
He will drop me like a bad habit.
No, not at all.
See you, boys. Thank you.
Yes, sir. For episode 100 and something of the podcast, we appreciate you joining in with Luke Dunkin, Kyle, Jessie, and myself. We'll see you in the next one after we solidify the last spot in the Bassmaster Classic. We'll see you.